and it says that, oh, you're not having this event, so it'll show a cancelled event concept. So that's why we had to go live right now. So Heidi, Julie, thank you for coming in. And the topic is yours. The introduction to the topic is yours. Introduction to yourselves is yours. So,
Thank you.
so whoever between you wants to start, please.
All right. Heidi, you're muted. So just FYI.
Thank you. That's hard to start that way. Thank you for that alert, Vikram. Thank you for having us. Great to be here and great to be part of this worldwide conversation. Let me start by introducing you to my phenomenal partner, Julie Field, who's Judge Julie Field just recently retired from the bench in Colorado, where she served the great state of Colorado for almost 11 years. And is really a brilliant lawyer, practitioner, law professor prior to taking her seat on the bench. And so she brings many perspectives to the process of family law. She's seen it from many angles, and she is a great thinker and somebody who really considers so many aspects, not only from a legal perspective, but also from a compassionate perspective, what the impact of actions are and the impact of the court. So I feel really privileged to partner with her in the creation of the Concilium Institute. And I'll turn it over to her and let her say a few words, and then we'll have a conversation sort of back and forth about what the Concilium process is, and
So,
welcome any questions.
so Julie is going to talk about Heidi. That's what's going to happen.
Correct. That's right. That's exactly right. We're not gonna let Heidi go without a beautiful introduction, because she deserves every adjective that I can think of on this, what is an early morning in Colorado. First of all, Vikram, thank you so much for including us in this international discussion about mediation, something that I know is near and dear to the hearts of both Heidi and myself. Heidi and I have known each other for I won't even say how long, many decades. We were toddlers. No, we weren't toddlers when we met. We met in college.
But we were young.
We were very young. And there was an immediate connection. We met when we were in college, just really for a very brief time, but completely stayed connected over the years. And Heidi is a brilliant family law attorney. She worked with her grandfather's law firm in the Boston area, and really through that work, working with families, determined that there had to be a better way to do family law cases. And so rather than just asking that question rhetorically, Heidi put her brilliant mind and her counseling background and law background to work and created the Concilium process, which is what we're going to introduce folks to today, and the connection to mediation that the process has. Heidi created this process for clients, but I think she will tell everyone that it made her life better. And I think one of the things that we see as mediators is when we do the work correctly, that it does enhance our own lives and our own work. And Heidi is a brilliant, thoughtful, innovative attorney. And I am so proud to partner with her to create the Concilium Institute to train lawyers in the process that she's developed and used so successfully over the past 16 years in her own practice. So Heidi, tell us about what is the Concilium process, and I know we've got Sherry here that I know has reached out to us in different forums, and I'd also love to hear any questions that she or Vikram have as we go along. But if you could just encapsulate what you created and where it came from.
Sure.
But Heidi, you'll have to just introduce the topic. The topic is restructuring families, a new approach to mediation. That's what the whole thing is. And of course, you bring in your process in that. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So how does mediation integrate with the concilium process? I think in order to, because the concilium process isn't understandable by everybody, it's, newly being deployed by us. I think it's incumbent upon us to explain what it is before we talk about how it integrates with mediation. So the concilium process really evolved, as Julie intimated, by my sort of saying, like many lawyers say, this process is broken. There has to be a better way to do this. This doesn't help families sort of come out more whole. This helps families be more dysfunctional often at the end of the process. And what really brought it home to me was a very sad event. I had actually stepped off of the practice for a few years. I'd had my third child and I was taking a little time off. I was home watching the 11 o'clock news one night, and on flashed the image of a young Marine killed in Iraq, who I recognized as the son of a former client. And I called her and obviously, was really sad time, and found out when his funeral would be and went to it. And at the funeral, one of his high school teachers eulogized him, saying in part, the reason he joined the Marines was because he felt like he'd never had a family. And I sat in that pew and I thought, my God, we'd spent so much time, energy, money, on this. And by many metrics, the outcomes had been good, but yet this young man hadn't been left feeling whole. And it really caused me to step back and say, what could I have done differently? What questions could I have asked? What process could I have used? And I had the advantage of having done my master's in psychology and education at Harvard before I went to law school. So I had another lens to look through. And I started doing a deep dive back into a lot of the literature that I was familiar with, but had sort of strayed from as I became a litigator and sort of became more enmeshed with being a lawyer than sort of my previous iteration. But I thought, what if I broke down these siloed practices and somehow integrated these processes and helped people from the outset create a simultaneous path of growth alongside the divorce, so that they're not entirely focused on the divorce. I got really tired of hearing people say after 2-3 years in litigation, so they have a settlement and they have an asset division and they have support and they have all these things that they've been fighting for. And then you'd hear, this sort of question of, now what do I do with my life? Which seemed insane to me that people hadn't been asking that question first. Why didn't we start with, why are you doing this? How do you think it will improve your life? What can the court do? What can the court not do? Where can you achieve those ends that the court can't accomplish? And there's a whole cadre of things that people hope the divorce will accomplish that we as lawyers know the court can't achieve, and yet they are achievable if you go to the right well looking for it. So helping sort of separate and distill these processes from the outset, and then help people achieve those ends in a very strategic and systematic way. So the process itself really breaks things apart and helps people go down these various paths in a way that does accomplish what they're coming in to do. Because in all my years of practice, I've never had a client walk in and say, what I really want at the end of this process is a decree. I mean, people don't walk into your office looking for a legal process. They walk into your office looking to relieve themselves of pain, looking to relieve themselves or get themselves extracted from a situation that can be everything from just unhappy to, abusive and hugely dysfunctional. So how, do you help someone analyze what the reason is that they're actually in your office? And many times this goes back prior to the marriage. So, this is sort of generational. There's a lot of reasons. And we at the Concilium process and Concilium Institute look both internally through a internal family systems analysis, the psychological process, and we look holistically at restructuring families through a business model of restructuring, and sort of when love is no longer the commodity for this family structure, and you're creating a new system, what do you do? How do you do it? And we take both that sort of macro and micro perspective to help someone re-envision their sort of next chapter. So along the way, in terms of mediation, as practitioners, Consilium certified practitioners, part of the process is helping someone understand what is the best way to achieve those ends. Is mediation a good option for you, or collaborative law, or litigation, or arbitration, or conciliation? I mean, there are many ways you can go, but helping someone at the outset understand and be empowered by the possibility of mediation is a huge factor for a practitioner to be able to do, and to really sit with someone and understand, you know, what the power structure is between the couple, what help they'll need in order to achieve those ends, how mediation may be able to be their best outcome, or in some instances, maybe it's not. But helping somebody understand what's involved in making that decision before they just jump in and say, I'm going to mediate. You know, my least favorite is when someone says, because my husband says I have to. You know, it's sort of what is going on here in the dynamic that makes someone come to mediation, and how do we do that most productively?
Well, and I've been a mediator for years. Before I was a judge, I was a mediator and worked as a court-appointed and private mediator for 15 years, and then was a judge for 11, and now am back since my retirement. In addition to doing the Consilium Institute, am also doing a private mediation practice. And there's a lot of overlap and commonality between what the Consilium process does and looks at for families and what the principles of mediation are and how they work for families. So if you think about the principles of mediation, they are looking at empowering the parties to discuss things, to communicate, to look at a solution together. It's solution oriented rather than confrontational oriented. It opens up communication rather than closing it down, and it allows the attorney who's Consilium trained to be able to better understand that process. One of the things that I've been frustrated about, and I think I came in in the last bit of the conversation that you were having with Sherry, Vikram, about how lawyers don't really understand mediation process and how mediation process really is supposed to work. And I think that's particularly true in family law cases. People go in very positionally and wanting to put barriers up around communication rather than open up communication. So the Consilium process, a Consilium trained attorney who comes into a mediation is going to be better prepared for the communication, open communication and dialogue that is done when a mediation is done properly. The respect that is engendered in the Consilium process and in mediation, being future focused, being values based, and solution oriented, and individualizing it, I think is the other piece of it. And with the goal of restructuring the family as always being the end result of looking at what is this system, this family system that is dissolving going to look like when a new family system is created, albeit in two different houses with the children involved. But it really is about looking at that restructuring. Consilium, though, is a little bit different because it's not necessarily mediation. As Heidi said, it can work in the attorney training can work and apply in whatever process the client needs, but it is particularly suited, I think, to the principles, and there's a lot of overlap with the principles of mediation. The Consilium process is used with an attorney with their client, helps to inform the attorney and puts them in that similar mindset to what they would have if they went into mediation. Heidi, anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I think that I'm curious if Sherry or Vikram have any questions about that and how it sort of integrates with Consilium. But I think that, you know, it's a natural sort of overlap between the two, because I think the curiosity is a word that I heard Sherry use, and it's a word I love. And it's a word that's really integral to the Consilium process as well, because I think until someone, a lawyer, you know, a practitioner, Consilium trained practitioner or mediator, gets curious, which means interested and is listening, and it involves a lot to be curious. And I think that when people are fact finders, as lawyers are really trained to be in so many ways, that's not a curiosity based, it's not a broad curiosity, let's put it that way. It's not that you're not curious to achieve certain information, to find certain information, but it's not, doesn't go to the heart of the matter. And I think when you're curious, truly curious about sort of someone as a human, as someone who sort of has multiple parts, is not just sort of a person with a problem, but is a person, then I think the process unfolds very differently, because you're hearing much more broadly than just sort of achievable outcomes that are countable on a balance sheet. That's sort of a very different outcome. You stop seeing children in the sense of days of the week or months of the year, but who are the children? How do I get to know who these children are and what their needs are? And you go much more deeply in terms of how this restructured family works effectively, considering the sensibilities, the proclivities, the challenges, the talents of the children. And you really know them as individuals, not just as birth dates and you know, a school schedule.
So Heidi, first question is, what is the logo all about?
Thank you for asking. You're so observant. You saw it in both of ours. The logo really integrates the three processes of psychology, law, and finance. And we have that coming together. We actually are launching a website today. In a couple hours, it should be live. And one of my favorite little things on the website is that this sort of comes together visually in a, you know, it does a little 3D thing. But yeah, these traditionally siloed processes of psychology, law, and finance really, in my mind, should be integrated. And Julie's and the Consilium practitioners we've already trained, I think, have embraced this idea that, you know, when a lawyer says to a client, you know, well, that's not my area of expertise, you should consult with a therapist. That's true. It's not that we're doing therapy, but that's not actually an appropriate response. Instead, being able to sort of go there and be not fearful about going where there's pain, but understanding, acknowledging, and having the information where you can usefully respond and recommend therapy, if that, you know, and work with a therapist who also understands the legal process. And part of what the Consilium Institute is doing is we're first training lawyers in this process, and then we'll be training financial advisors and therapists. So the therapist will have an understanding of the law and finance in the ways that are pertinent to family law, and the financial advisors will have an understanding of the law and the psychology. So, you know, that everyone is trained in this process. And when you're referring to someone who is Consilium trained, you know that you're sort of speaking the same language, because although there are many organizations that sort of attempt to have different practitioners come together, they're all, you know, it's sort of like a world conference when everyone's speaking different languages. And we wanted to sort of start with everyone speaking the same language, and then having communication be more simple. So we will need translators, though, yeah, into other
into other professions,
into other
right,
languages,
right.
other.
So you kind of answered my second question, which was going to be what all is involved in it. So if you said psychology, law, and finance, but can we make it broader than that? Is it
Sure.
more we can get into it?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a couple of, you know, there are many resources I've drawn on in the creation of the Consilium process, but there are two that I've leaned hard on. And one is called Internal Family Systems, which was developed by a man named Dick Schwartz. And it's really a theory of the internal pieces or parts that everyone has. No one is one-dimensional. And it's a very useful theory because I think when people are particularly vulnerable during a divorce, you know, they have many competing parts. You know, I love you and I hate you. You know, I never want to see you again and you're forever the father of my children. You know, there are many things going on for people. And to try to pretend that that's not true, you know, that you're only the best parent in the world and the other person's the worst parent in the world. I mean, that's really, in most instances, not true. Not that that's not ever the case, that someone's, you know, shouldn't be having parental rights, but in the vast majority of cases, that's not true. And so really helping people recognize from the very beginning, for instance, what the other parent's strengths are and what their own challenges are, and vice versa, helps people create a schedule that for children is most effective, so that you're able to say, you know, this is an avenue where your spouse really is terrific, and you can help that. They can help you and help your child by you allowing them to do that. And, you know, you can both sort of work in a complementary fashion. The other piece that is that we do a lot of training on is derived from the fifth discipline, which is created by a man named Peter Senge, who's a professor at the business school at MIT in Cambridge, little school here. That is he really was a business system philosophy or and sort of entity that he created, having to do with the way large businesses interact. But there was a lot of applicability, I thought, to family models, because as I said earlier, when I think when we were beginning this discussion, talking about love as a commodity. And I think when you have love as a commodity, you know, families function differently. When that's not true, then you have to create another system that works effectively post that system. So you're evolving into something else. But just like there's dissolutions as opposed to, you know, in reorganizations, in bankruptcies, for instance, families also can reorganize and not just dissolve. And I think it's a great mistake to talk about divorce as an ending, because it's not. It's a restructuring. You know, for kids, their parents go on and their families are still their families, but they are different kinds of families. So how we help someone restructure and see that as a healthy move for the family is really important. And that's part of what Concilium does as well.
Judy wants to.
Yeah.
No, of course. I'm going to still looking at it in a broader manner, but let Julie come in if she wants to come in at this stage on a broader level, because obviously you looked at it this way, but over time, are you looking at it in a more broader way?
I would say yes. I mean, I think one of the pieces that Heidi so brilliantly brought together in terms of the internal family systems and the business restructuring theories are just a part of it, because one of the things that we work very hard with, working with lawyers especially around, that again has a lot of resonance in terms of mediation, is we work with them on listening skills, which anyone who's ever worked with a lawyer may know that sometimes they're a little challenged in that capacity. But we work with them on active listening skills, and not just the attending, but the real deep listening and understanding, and working towards understanding of their client's position and what is happening with the other side. So again, a lot of overlap in terms of mediation skills. And we also work with and train the attorneys in learning styles and adult learning theory, and how people learn so that they can communicate better with their clients, with other counsel, with other parties, with courts. And we work with them also on shifting language, because the divorce language itself is very negative. If you think about it, we're talking about broken families, we're talking about separation, we're talking about estrangement. And we shift that language to talk about restructuring and an innovation in a family rather than a destruction of a family. So in terms of the broader picture, it is the broader view, I think, of trying to, and one of the long-term goals of the Concilium process and the Concilium Institute is to really change that language, change that approach, change that perspective on divorces, literally all over the world. It's a small goal, I know, but but one that that we
It's achievable.
it's achievable. And I honestly, I left the bench because I was so excited about doing this work with Heidi.
Well, that's how I'm looking at it. I looked, Julie, I don't know, Heidi also has, I'm sure, heard me, so I won't, she'll be familiar. One thing I'm against is the whole, which we'll be discussing in the next topic, which is
Yes.
mediation in the court system. The other thing I keep talking about is heart, soul, spirituality, and mediation. For me, those are important elements which don't normally get discussed. So I'm looking at your process and the way, is spirituality going to fit in somewhere? The soul connection, the heart, those elements, are they going to come in? How are they going to come in? A little bit of that.
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that Concilium that I sort of created over time is something they call a restructuring covenant. And I call it a covenant, not a contract, because I say to people it's more of a blessing than it is a contract, and it's not enforceable by court. But its intention is to speak to your values and all the things, frankly, that a divorce agreement does not speak to. What is it that you want to continue? What was good about this family? How do we sort of honor that? And how do we, the reason that spirituality often comes into it is because if that is a common sort of goal or a common value of people, it's often not mentioned even in a divorce and separation agreement. It's nothing that the court goes to, separation of church and state. I mean, that's not going to happen. It's not going to be in there unless it's really disputed in terms of, whether or not someone can go to a church or a temple or a mosque of their choosing. But the restructuring covenant phrases it in a more positive light. So if this is a value, how do we exemplify that? How do we honor that? And how do we institute that in our restructuring? So those are the kinds of things that document often speaks to and helps people sort of elucidate what it is that they're trying to achieve there. And that engenders often conversations about spirituality for people, what their values are, and how much they want to have that be a part of their ongoing life. And sometimes people, have it leads to mutual holiday celebrations, or it leads to, there are other sort of manifestations of how people express their spirituality. And sometimes I've found often in these restructurings of families, it makes them reflect on the experience of their children and what the takeaway will be for them post sort of this new creation of a family, and then how they re-envision what those celebrations might be like, or the expression of their spirituality might be like.
Yeah.
So
because one is this, it's the expression of the spirituality. The other is the spirituality in the entire process, in the process itself. Not the, of course, in the restructuring aspect of it, of course, how they have to deal with whatever the religious, look, because we are dividing that whole thing. I don't know, you were, Heidi, were you part of that discussion earlier when we did that discussion on spirituality? There were people from all over.
I know. I think the question I think you're asking in terms of like, is the experience sort of spiritual? Is the sort of, is there an honoring by mediation almost of how we sort of take on the process as being something larger than ourselves. And I think the answer is yes, but it takes really special people and special practitioners to engage in that. And I think that it's evolutionary. And I think that I've had that experience, but it's definitely, I would say, more rare than not, that everyone involved, parties, lawyers, practitioners, like that the whole sort of group can experience that. I think it's more typical that a practitioner and a client can sort of engage in that conversation as a, as a dynamic and carry that into the room. To expect that to happen sort of with everyone, I think is definitely more challenging in my experience.
Let's get Julie's view on it, then I'll.
Yeah, and I think that one of the challenges that we have in teaching lawyers the concilium process in particular, I think, is, for example, going back to the restructuring covenant and just the concept of that. A lot of lawyers have a really hard time wrapping their head around, you mean I'm going to draft a document that my client is going to sign, but it's not going to be approved by the court, and it's not going to be something that I can, call a contract, and enforce? How does that work? And so I think getting that shift in perspective is one step along the way of helping the lawyers get to that more centered, more grounded place that becomes hopefully in sync with their client in thinking about what does the future really look like. And in terms of that spirituality and that deeper thinking and analysis, and I really want to hear your perspective on this, Vikram, because I've not had the benefit yet of hearing many of your recordings or participating in your discussions, and I look forward to doing that. But I think that one of the things that I've seen is that as the lawyers get more versed in this, and as they are being more mindful in terms of their listening skills, being more grounded in terms of taking the time that they need to with their clients, I think that has helped them to get to that more spiritual, deeper place for themselves and for their clients. And we're partnering, the Concilium Institute is also partnering with the Kalyana Project and Phoenix Resilience and Tribe Mind Body, some different organizations here in Colorado that can help ground people in that spirituality, in that mindfulness, in those practices that we expect and anticipate that attorneys will take into their relationships with their clients as Concilium practitioners.
Well, that the symposium that I did last month on heart, soul, spirituality, and mediation, discussion was more about what does a mediator bring in and what is really happening in the process, more than these elements that are discussed in that whole theoretical aspect of mediation. So is there more there? And that is where the whole concept of course, spirituality and connection with the heart, the soul, those elements came in. So I was just thinking that maybe, look, these things are not discussed because maybe these are not even things that people focus on. Like finally it comes down to, do you have theory on it? Where does it come from? What are you talking about? Do you have scientific backing
Evidence.
of what you're saying? Yes, show us this. So maybe because of that is not discussed, but because some things, even if they don't put words to it, is it really happening there? So I was just thinking from your logo perspective, with the center of the mediator and the outside, that circle, is there more that is happening there? And if you have to,
well,
yeah,
no, I mean, I love the question, because I think there is sort of an honoring, I guess is the word that comes to mind, of the family, of the individuals, of sort of the existence of what you've created and what you want to continue, that is spiritual, I mean, that is sort of something larger, I guess is the way I see it, is something larger than this process, something larger than this sort of, because you're mired in the difficulties when you're, in the divorce, and it's very sort of issue specific often. And I think to step in above it and take sort of a vantage point from above looking down, then you have sort of the opportunity to see things in a very different light. There's one aspect of concilium we haven't talked about, there are many aspects of concilium we haven't talked about, but one that comes to mind that I think this is a good time perhaps to talk about is a role that I created over time called the concilium consultant. And the concilium consultant really takes a 30,000-foot view of the situation from the outset and works with the lawyers ultimately who are hired by the client. So that person is really uniquely positioned to engage with the client on a deeper level, on a spiritual level, if you would, because that is really a time when it's like you're part of the process and you're not part of the process. So you have the ability to sort of bring into it more perspectives and more sort of opportunities to sort of integrate things that aren't decidedly a part of the resolution, but are maybe external to sort of the bigger picture.
Well, that's why I'll go back a little bit back to the heart soul spirituality aspect of it, because a certain box of mediation maybe went out from the US because a formal concept of mediation maybe was something that you brought in there. Okay, so this is mediation, and let's put it out. And I've been saying this, I mean, you can correct me on that. I mean, maybe these are just thoughts that I put out, but I'm saying in a society where that heart soul spirituality might not have been an important aspect of society, so they did not have to look at it as part of mediation. So that did not go out. And of course, when you're developing something, of course, you're going to be looking at the world. You're not just looking at the US thing. So maybe certain elements which might not have come into that process when you were discussing it, maybe a larger view on that part of it, because I still feel that gets left out. But the other thing, that interesting thing that's happening is, I don't know whether you people are aware of that, family constellations. Are you aware of that?
Can you talk about it? No.
It's very interesting. In the Brazilian courts are using that. So of course we've had discussions with it with Gabriela. So you can actually search on YouTube by Mediator Vikram Gabriela, and you'll find that. So that's a very interesting concept. I don't know, look, how it will fit into the concilium thing. Of course, I mean, that I can't say how you are looking at it, but there the whole concept of, I mean, it's very interesting the way it functions. And you can actually, I saw a little video also of the Brazilian court where it was happening. So basically there are other people outside. I mean, the person who has the issue is in a way designating other people as playing certain roles, and then finally it's left to those people talking within themselves, and this person just becomes an observer to it. And then after watching that discussion and everything, maybe certain things get resolved in the person's mind and in that relationship. So I mean, I'm just giving you a very, very broad part of it.
Yeah.
Because we did record a session, but we of course I did not put it out on YouTube because it was someone talking about the issue, and I really want to do that. I wanted to see what the process was all about. So I found it really interesting because I mean, we were even in the Zoom session, and of course one person was chosen as you have some issue. Briefly tell us what it's all about. Now within the Zoom session, designate someone as whatever character, whatever, so and so, and then after that, those people actually said they were feeling something different. Someone was, I mean, not feeling comfortable. Someone was not something. I just found that very interesting. So
interesting. That is interesting. That's really interesting.
And I mean, they were actually getting involved to that extent. Yeah. So I mean, that's just the fact, because you're doing family, and I said whenever family comes in, you should look at the broader aspect of what's happening. Please look into that. See whether it fits into your process, doesn't fit into the process. I can't say, but just have a look at it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's really, it makes me think about the name concilium and where it comes from. Julie speaks well on this, actually, if you want to sort of pick it up here, but like talking about other perspectives. And I don't know that we've talked about what it means, but maybe you want to pick up and run with that a little bit.
Right. The name concilium didn't just come out of the air. It is based on history. In ancient Greece, a judge who was deciding important issues about a family would bring together his concilium of advisors, and those were the people that knew that family best. So each family who had an issue before the judge there would be a different concilium of advisors who would advise the judge and give input about the family. And so the idea and how that was put into our institute is to that same vision of bringing together the therapists, the financial advisors, other allied professionals, and the attorney to assist the family and bringing together that team approach, which I think many people here, at least in terms of in the US, in terms of the attorneys, find that to be very appealing because they value, and I think courts, speaking as myself as a judge and from a judge's perspective, there is a lot of value to getting different perspectives around a family who is in the throes of a dissolution or divorce.
I think often times the way the court hears that, though, is through a more adversarial process, through a guardian ad litem, through an evaluation, through something that is not that it's punitive, but it feels evaluative in a way that is judgmental. And I think the goal of Concilium is to start from a perspective of how do we harness together the right people to help this family sort of re-envision itself in a more constructive way. And you know, it's not seen as a I don't know, a win-lose situation, but rather sort of a win-win situation. How do we really, you know, do this most effectively? So I think the family constellation, yeah, I'm totally curious to look at that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, very interesting. It's very interesting. Just the fact that something I would have, I mean, the other people who were there, the kind of things they said, that what they were feeling.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just found that really interesting. That how does that work? Because,
right. And what's the utility? Like, who was using it? Like, what were the ones they made those comments?
I mean, imagine the Brazilian courts are using it. I mean, that was amazing.
That's the other piece that's interesting, is that if the courts are using it.
Exactly. I mean,
a little bit scary because it's a little jury-like. I don't know.
No, it's nothing. I mean, I tell you, it's interesting to the extent that the person is sitting there and seeing someone else, other people go about having a communication between themselves in relation to this person's problem, and actually this person relating to this, and then being able to resolve that whole issue based on what the other people communicated with each other. That's really interesting. That's really interesting.
Fascinating. Yeah, I think it's fascinating. Yeah, we'll definitely look into that. It's great. Gabriella, what's her name that you had the conversation with?
We've had a couple of them on the show, so she's always brought that up there.
Yeah,
fascinating.
No, that is really interesting, and I love the idea of that input and people being able to hear others' perspectives, and I think that obviously that has a lot of common ground with mediation, right? That the mediator can give that different lens to look through their questions and their
but imagine, but this is on the totally the other side of Concilium. In Concilium, you were bringing in people who knew the family. These are people who don't know the person at all.
Right.
All.
No. And I think it's fascinating. Yeah. It's just, you're just an observer. You know, you're just an observer, but what is it? It's fascinating, actually.
Yeah. And, you know, and the fact is, as a judge, I often felt like I was coming into the middle of a conversation, right, with a family, that because I didn't know the family, I was given whatever pieces of information in a very short time frame that the attorney, that was filtered through the attorneys, that they wanted me to hear. And this model would have been much more helpful to have that ongoing conversation and discussion with people that were looking at it from an outside perspective.
So now, but Julie, now look at it from an outside perspective. You are not part of Concilium. From mandatory mediation, are we moving to mandatory Concilium? If you were on the
Yeah.
bench, what would you do?
Right.
Yeah.
So
Right.
funny.
Right. No, I mean,
Very funny.
if we're moving to the family constellation or mandatory conciliation,
Concilium,
concilium, what do you,
Concilium, right, right.
Concilium.
concilium?
Yeah, moving to
Yeah.
mandatory concilium. I mean, I think that,
I think there would be a
I think
huge
it's,
advantage,
I do too.
honestly, because
Oh,
I
yeah.
think there would be, the the practitioners who were most effective as attorneys in my courtroom were the ones I think who were trained in mediation and who really not just trained in mediation, but who really uh, incorporated mediation concepts and analysis and thoughts and again that level of curiosity and communication, and brought that into their litigation as well, because I think there can be some effectiveness in that. But yeah, I mean, and
Like,
in terms of what we're doing with Concilium, I think that our goal is to have people ask, is this attorney Concilium trained before they hire them? Because we want them to look for that difference and that perspective.
we want it to be as common as when people say, I have a headache, and here people say, do you have any Advil? That's sort of like we want, I'm thinking about getting divorced. I need to find a Concilium practitioner, because that's really, what we want people to understand, is that it will be a more effective. And honestly, my experience, having done this now for about 16 years, is when people hear of it, they don't want anything else. Most people, because no matter where you are in the spectrum emotionally, from, paralyzed, frightened, angry, anxious, vindictive, like no matter where it is, a good Concilium practitioner can meet the client where they are and help them evolve. And I've done it all across the spectrum, no matter if you're the driver or you're the recipient of something you don't want. It really doesn't matter. It has applicability in every instance. And people know that. I mean, they hear it. And, I got to the point where, frankly, I was too busy to take on everything that was coming my way. So my reaction would be, I just don't have the bandwidth. And people, well, who does? It's like, well, I think we need to train some more people. That's sort of the evolution of how we came here.
But tell me about this whole concept of collaborative practice that's being discussed. I mean, how does this connect with that? Or because we're going to have a discussion on collaborative practice later in the conference, but
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Collaborative practice is, it's another lens, another practice. I think it's a good practice. Concilium can overlay, with those practices as well. I think it's a unique, somebody said to me the other day, I think the collaborative practice is as good as the practitioners. It depends who the people are who are involved. And that's true in any process, right? But there are times that people say they're collaboratively trained, but they get into the room, it's 2 lawyers, 2 clients, and a coach who's generally a mental health person of some stripe. But if the collaborative lawyers are really litigators at heart, and they're using that forum as a way to sort of, bang the table harder, but in private, that's not going to really be an effective collaborative process. So the question is, what are the practitioners, how able are they to really engage with that process? I think it can be a really, really useful way for clients to resolve conflict. And of course, I do think that the Concilium trained practitioner is going to be more effective at doing that. And that's my reaction. Yours, Julie?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think that the collaborative process is a specific methodology that has been embraced as an alternative way of resolving divorce cases and I don't know if it's international. I know in many states in the US, it's been embraced more or less, depending on the jurisdiction. But Concilium works from the attorney-client perspective. So an attorney can be Concilium trained and use the collaborative process. An attorney can be Concilium trained and use mediation in their case. A person can be Concilium trained and use arbitration or litigation as needed in their case. So it's not a substitute for litigation the way the collaborative process is. It's more of a grounding and an educational process and an approach for the attorneys, the financial advisors, and the therapists who are taught the Concilium process and who incorporate that into their practice.
Perfect. So now we'll have to move towards the conclusion part of it. So please, Heidi will. It's not like I keep saying it's not conclusion. There are no conclusions to all these things. Just a matter of wrapping it up, kind of thing. Because obviously we'll start the next one later. Yeah.
Sure. Concluding, we're really hoping that the Concilium practitioner will be a better informed practitioner, and that clients and families will benefit from the experience. I mean, obviously, families going through a divorce, it's not something anyone ever goes into a marriage hoping for, or, when you're meeting someone, it's clearly, a difficult time in their lives, but it is also an opportunity for growth. And, if people can see it as that, and not just as a rupture, but also as an opportunity for their own growth and for the growth of their family, and use it and be helped to sort of effectively resolve conflict that way, I think it's absolutely a better way. And there's no reason, in this day and age, for us not to be able to integrate and use all the information we have and not be stuck sort of in English contract law that we sort of in the US inherited so many years ago, and sort of see that as the only model and the only way for a family to continue or to divorce.
Yeah.
Yes, Julie, your wrapping up remarks.
Yeah, I have been doing family law since the mid 1980s, when I was a law student. The summer after my first year of law school, I started doing family law, and I never looked back. And the whole time I've said, there has to be a better way. There has to be a better way, as do many people who are involved in that process. Through that journey, from that first year law student until now, I've been a teacher, a mediator, an attorney, a judge, a trainer, and I left the bench because I do believe that Concilium is the better way, and I'm very enthusiastic and excited about bringing this to attorneys, bringing it to anyone who is involved in a family who is going through a restructuring through the divorce process.
But Julie, are you going to be able to take off the judge hat? Is that, or does that stay with you for some time? How does that happen? What is going to happen?
How does the hat come off?
Yes, does it come off for some time, or
the robe?
The robe, yeah, the robe. It does. It does and it doesn't. I find that I learned so much from being a judge, in terms of I did every kind of case as a judge. I did criminal cases, I did domestic family law cases, I did civil cases, medical malpractice, I did car accidents, I did everything. And it's the piece that still resonates with me is it all stems from families. And to me, that's always, and the reason that I embrace that as a law student in going forward is because I know that that is the heart of our society, and where change can happen to make our society better.
But only thing is that you moved Heidi into Concilium she was doing some groundbreaking research on the middle child. What happened to that?
That was like a side project. I think Consilium was more the passion project, but that's also an interesting project, Vikram. We should get back to it. That's so funny.
Exactly.
You have an amazing
Yeah.
memory,
Yeah.
memory. But
So-
you know, I think that that's a whole other conversation, right?
Yeah.
But I would just add this if I could. We're launching our website today. If you want to check it out, it is at consiliuminstitute.com. It's not live yet, I don't think. It probably won't be for a few hours, but you know, if people want to learn more about it, that's where they can do that.
Yeah. What you can also do is you can make a little write-up, very basic write-up, and let's put it in the post also. I'll put the YouTube link also, if we can put it there. Although we missed out on Sherry's question. She was wondering what the invitation to attorneys to participate in Consilium looks like.
Do you want to take that, Julie, in terms of trainings? Or do you want me to address that? Go ahead.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, we have a number of trainings going on. We have a live training in Colorado. Sherry, I forget where you are. I think in the Midwest.
In Michigan, I think.
Michigan?
If I recall. Was it
Can you
Michigan,
speak?
Sherry?
Hi, I'm in Minnesota.
Oh,
In
Minnesota. I
Minnesota.
knew it was an M
Okay.
state.
So maybe you want to come to Panama. We're doing a training in October in Panama. With this will be an integrated training with the resilience and sort of mental health component that we're partnering with folks who have done a number of trainings in Panama. So that's going to be an awesome sort of trip training integrated experience. We have a live training in Colorado in September, and we'll be doing a remote training in August. And all the sort of logistical registration application information is on the website at consiliuminstitute.com. If you have questions about it, please let us know. The other offering that we have are making is and we're happy to talk to you about this, if you wanted to host a training in Minnesota and pull together a group of 10 or 12 people, 8 to 10, so we probably need at least 8 for us to come to you. But we will come to you if you would like that and do a training there. So we're happy to talk to you more about that as well.
Yeah,
But
and the
please,
training itself is 2 days plus some follow-up sessions. We do have it approved for continuing education in Colorado, and we're looking at reciprocity in other states.
And the
Wonderful.
fact that you,
I applaud your work. This is fantastic, and so happy and grateful to see and hear this.
Well,
Ah.
we would love to have you join the revolution, and it's 22 hours. I don't know if Julie said that of credit. I don't know what Minnesota's requirements are.
but the important thing is that the fact that you're telling her here, now you have to have a special Mediator Vikram discount that you have to give people.
Absolutely, we were
will.
totally
Whoever's
happy
listening to
with
this, whoever's listening to this, just say that you want a Mediator Vikram
put
discount. You then do
Vikram-
something.
Right.
We
put Vikram in the-
absolutely we will honor that discount.
Perfect.
Definitely don't want costs
yeah.
to be an impediment. We want to spread it. So put Vikram in the subject line.
So thank you very much. And of course, we'll carry the conversation on to the next topic, but I'll just finish this one here. So thank you very much, Julie, Heidi, and of
Thank you.
course, Sherry to come.